Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Baltimore, and welcome to Reality Asserts Itself. We're continuing our series of interviews with Max Blumenthal about his new book, and he now joins us in the studio. Max is an award-winning journalist, a best-selling author, and his last book, before this one, was Republican Gomorrah, Inside the Movement That Shattered the Party. It was a New York Times and Los Angeles Times bestseller, and of course, this book is Goliath, Life and Loathing in Greater Israel. Thanks for joining us again.
Good to be with you.
So you have a profile of a very fascinating guy in the book, and I want to read a quote. His name is Arnon Sofer, and I'll read a quote from the book, and then we'll talk about him. As with everything that guided Israel's national policy, demographics were an overriding factor. Quote, unilateral separation doesn't guarantee peace, Arnon Sofer, the so-called Arab counter, who helped devise the Gaza separation, remarked in 2004. It guarantees a Zionist Jewish state with an overwhelming majority of Jews, end quote. Echoing the stark forecast Dayan presented at Nahal Oz almost 5 decades before, Sofer spelled out the implications of the withdrawal. Quote, when 2.5 million people live in a closed-off Gaza, it's going to be a human catastrophe. Those people will become even bigger animals than they are today, with the aid of an insane fundamentalist Islam. The pressure at the border will be awful. It's going to be a terrible war. So if we want to remain alive, we have to kill and kill and kill all day, every day. If we don't kill, we will cease to exist. So tell us about Arnon Sofer, because when I read this quote, I first of all wanted to know, well, is this some like crazy guy on the margins of Israeli society? And I went and we'll put up his picture for you. This guy's a real guy. Sofer is one of the University of Haifa founders, amongst other things. Since 1970, he taught, mentored, and is involved at the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces Command and Staff College. In 1978, he became a professor of the National Defense College and was appointed head of the college research center in 2007. He's retired now, but he teaches senior people in the military. And this is his quote, kill, kill, kill if we want to exist.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to see everything that's happened since 1893 as something that is as a blueprint that's been meticulously planned and designed to confine the Palestinians to as small a space as possible, with the most Palestinians in the smallest space, to reserve the most land for Jewish Israelis. Arnon Sofer has really designed the policy of the last maybe decade or 15 years that has defined the political and geographic and even the military environment in Israel. He's one of the most influential people in Israel in the post-Oslo era, and most people watching this right now have never heard of Arnon Sofer. Arnon Sofer is nicknamed by his colleagues at Haifa University Arnon the Arab Counter. And that's because he is a demographer who's obsessed with conceiving policies and plans to engineer the Jewish demographic majority until well into the future. And you heard this quote about him talking about Gaza becoming sealed off and the Israeli army being required to kill and kill all day, every day, otherwise we cease to exist. This is right before the Gaza withdrawal, as it's known, when thousands of settlers, mostly religious nationalist settlers, were withdrawn against their will from the Gaza Strip, and the Gaza Strip was promptly placed under siege. Hamas was elected, fended off a coup from Fatah, and the siege was tightened. And Arnon Sofer's prediction really came to bear. The Israeli military calls it mowing the lawn, but they mount these periodic strikes with, or escalations, which culminated with Operation Cast Lead with drones, where they're constantly attacking and harassing the civilian and population of Gaza, and also attacking whatever military targets they can find. And this relates to the general policy of separation. Israel has officially separated with Gaza. It no longer has settlements there. It has no desire to be among the people, and so they have basically become surplus humanity. Gaza has to be warehoused. Then Sofer devised this policy because the Gaza Strip consists of 80% refugees who actually have connections to land inside Israel, primarily in southern Israel, were ethnically cleansed in 1948 and in the years afterwards, and they'd like to return. So this is a way of maintaining the Jewish demographic majority. But even before that, Sofer produced an influential monograph called Israel 2000 to 2020, where he predicted the end of a Jewish demographic majority between the river and the sea, unless Israel carried out a certain blueprint. And he sold Ariel Sharon on this blueprint right before Sharon became prime minister. And it demanded that Israel build a separation wall within the West Bank, surrounding the major Jewish settlement blocks and bringing them into what would be a future Jewish state, then confining the Palestinians to what he called three sausages, which are the three major Bantustans of the West Bank, which we talked about before, the three major population areas. This was what convinced Sharon to begin building the separation wall, which has caused so much misery among Palestinians. And it's actually a policy that the Israelis, that Sofer refers to as hafradah, or separation, which is really eerily reminiscent of the Afrikaans phrase apartheid, which means separateness. And it's through this policy, Sofer's ideas have influenced and even animated the political reality today in Israel, where Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza have basically disappeared from Israeli life, or they're not as present inside Israel proper. And so Benjamin Netanyahu is able to boast of this kind of one-way peace and preside over it, where Israelis are at the beach in Tel Aviv, they're at cafes in West Jerusalem, and they don't fear Palestinians anymore, and they hardly see them anymore. Early in the 90s, Yitzhak Rabin declared his goal was to take Gaza out of Tel Aviv, and that's happened under Netanyahu. During the Second Intifada, when there was a wave of suicide bombings, Haaretz, the voice of the liberal Israeli public, declared that the repression campaign in the West Bank of the Israeli army was a war for croissants in the morning and beer in the evening, because it was the cafes of the enlightened public that were under attack, the bars of the enlightened public that were under attack by suicide bombers. It was Benny Morris's cafe that was bombed in Jerusalem that led him to this extreme right-wing conclusion that Palestinians have to be placed into a cage. So they have been put in a cage under Sofer's policies in the Gaza Strip and increasingly in the West Bank. And this has allowed Netanyahu to enjoy political stability, to enjoy the complicity of the Zionist left and the enlightened public, and the support of the right as he expands settlements. And Netanyahu refers to this environment as peace without peace, or this policy as peace without peace. In other words, that Israelis are enjoying a one-way peace, while Palestinians are constantly harassed and besieged, and there is no agreement possible. As long as there's peace without peace, Netanyahu remains dominant with no clear rival or challenger.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And in the next segment of our interview, we're going to talk about some of the criticism of Max's book. Please join us for the next segment of our interview with Max on Reality Asserts Itself on the Real News Network.